Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Scott Westman. He's Vice President of Sales for the Public Sector at Elation. Scott, good to have you with us.
Great to be here, Tom. Thanks for having me.
And Elation is a data-oriented platform and set of services for the federal government and other commercial clients. And I want to get into the big topic that is on really every government agency's mind in this age of data. They know they're in the age of data, but in some cases, the government is maybe behind industry in its use of data. If you would define for us the value of data, it sounds basic, and maybe how you get value from data, I think is what the challenge agencies have these days.
Data is really the fuel behind what drives success for any organization, including government. And if we look at some of the mission critical problems in federal and state and local governments, you're looking at fraud and improper payments prevention. You're looking at the talent management gap that they're facing. And obviously what we're all facing today is around healthcare challenges. So as we look at kind of the beginning state of what a lot of those challenges or duplication around those issues, it's around a lack of great data. So, I go back to my 7th grade computing class, it's the whole garbage in, garbage out scenario, which resonates many years later. Without great data, there's a downstream effect.
All right. And let's take hiring, for example. How can data help that process, which results in better people in a more timely manner and therefore better mission delivery? It kind of cascades. How can data bring value to that particular process as an example?
Sure. So I think it's a couple of things. In a very competitive market, it's number one, it's access to the data. Do the right people have access to the right data, in this case around talent in the market? And secondly, it's around governing that data, the automation of it. So if we know we're getting the right data, which is the first step. If we can automate, apply analytics to that data, the efficiencies around getting the right people targeted, the right people in, the right people processed, certainly in the military, if we're looking at recruiting, or in the civilian marketplace, in a very competitive marketplace with industry, getting the right people in and trained and delivering on mission as quickly as possible is an incredible efficiency that is capable with great data.
And of course, agencies need to have the people equipped to know what to do with data once they decide they want to do more with data, and they are under legal mandate, we should say, statutory mandate to manage federal agencies and programs according to what the data is telling them. So how do you develop a data culture in an agency so that you begin to do this as a natural way of doing business?
Absolutely. And you mentioned, Tom, recent federal legislation, whether it's the Data Act back in 2014 or ongoing federal data strategy. These are compelling events by which certainly federal agencies have been driven to hire chief data officers and build teams around them. So the way to do that is, the first, we've got to level set and understand that the government already has a great asset. There's data everywhere. So second step is providing access to it, getting the right people, automating those processes to get data in, and then creating a data culture. So what does that mean? Not just relying on IT data stewards, putting data in the hands of people that can make a difference, program leads, business users. So everyone, singing from the same sheet of music yields incredibly efficiency in solving mission critical problems.
Yeah, the implication there is that every transaction, every activity is already generating data.
Exactly.
But the issue is to get your arms around organizing it and making it available, and then having people understand what they can do with it once they can access it.
Data is already at their fingertips. So it's already there and it's growing exponentially, quite frankly. So how do we automate processes to deal with this, exponential growth and, really look for the gold and leverage that? And once we've built success around that using artificial intelligence and machine learning, that process will improve over time. So the more data coming in, the process gets better, it automates, and it enables people to do their jobs better in the federal market.
Well, tell us more about some of the technical underpinnings you need to automate that data capture, data organizing, data flow, data access, all of those things you need in place, because databases are all over the place. Mm-hmm. Non-structured data is all over the place. So how do you What are some of the technical underpinnings to get it all organized above the systems you already have?
There's a couple of ways to do it. I mean, the way we look at it is there's typically an access problem. It's getting to the data. So if we look at a data catalog, for example, for which Elation provides, it's the ability to go out, point to the data, bring it in, organize it, et cetera. But secondly, there's a governance aspect of that data. So that's really that second piece. That's where, again, I keep talking about the automation process. If we can apply that data, we can get access to it, search those databases you alluded to. We can bring the data in, apply governance rules. And when I say governance, that's typically, a lot of folks, even in industry, look at that as a punitive measure or it's a compliance check the box. Doesn't have to be. And that's where data culture comes in. If we can make it an iterative process, if we can make it as an improvement process, then those are really the two aspects, Tom, that you're talking about, is the access and the governance. That's what builds success across programs.
And do you also need a front end of all of this governance and automation process such that when people look at a data catalog, they're not looking at something cryptic, but looking at something like they would see in the volumes of books, that they can understand what it is that's there that they can use then, avail themselves of?
So that's a great point. And that's really one of the differentiators with Elation is the ease of use, is that front end GUI, if you will, that provides the capability of search and the governance and puts that in the hands of the business user. So someone like myself who's not very technical uses Elation every day to go out, find, query the data, run analysis, and then find those reports, for example, that are going to be more, let's say, cogent to what I'm looking for. And that's going to save me time. And then it's iterative in the fact that there could be rankings among the data, commentary, collaboration. So I know not only what I'm looking for, I know what's best for my use case.
And I guess if you have your data organized that way, that it's also enables more productivity on the part of people developing applications, because those have data calls and knowing what it is they have to accomplish. If the developers understand the data, then they can deliver better applications faster.
You've heard the adage that typically in this market, people are spending 80% of their time looking for the data or scrambling for it and just 20% on analysis. We want to flip that. We want to, some quick queries, able to automate the process of bringing the data in and then spending the bulk of the time doing what you're supposed to do, whether it's analysis or driving mission critical success.
And in looking across the board at federal agencies and having a view into what is going on in the private sector, what do you see as the main challenges agencies have in getting to that data culture and then in getting to that process that supports a data culture?
Typically, we've seen silos, and I think this resonates with commercial or government. There's typically been, if we're talking to governance, a command and control methodology or architecture. And that creates what we call data silos, whether purposefully or inadvertently. So if there are data silos, it makes it near impossible for the right people to get access to that data. What we're looking to do is flip that on its head and make it an iterative process, make it a people process. And we like to call it democratization of data. Get access and data in the hands that for people who need to use it.
And that implies then that leadership has to be behind this whole idea, because people tend to hug their silos, to mix a metaphor, and not necessarily are so eager to share data necessarily.
Exactly. And I think from a strategic perspective, if we're looking at time to results and accurate results with a people-centric approach, that very quickly, we've seen success with a lot of government leaders saying, hey, if I can get to the right answer or get the right data to the right people at the right time, 10 times faster, I'm on board. Let's do this. And that's where we've seen a lot of success, whether it's federal health or other civilian or DoD agencies, is that quick path to success.
And just underscore again that point that the data and the data governance and the data use is not only for the CIO and the chief data officer and the data analysts, but it's really, when you say democratization, that means people on the front lines.
Exactly. Just to give a quick example, if I could, from a federal health agency we're working with, is they have a national effort in terms of modernizing and integrating health data in a surveillance effort to protect all of us. And that's, particularly important in this time of COVID. And they're moving from essentially ingesting data from disparate silos to getting an enterprise understanding of that data. They're enabling users, which they hadn't done before, across programs, across business, to access that data from these siloed platforms and share that data efficiently and effectively. And what's critically important, of course, Tom, is the governance of that, which we enable. So if we're sharing it, we've got to make sure that data is secured and the right people are getting access to it, and the people who shouldn't have access shouldn't. So we're able to do all of that. And the ability, to empower those scientists, encourage innovation, is absolutely critical. And those scientists are collaborating with the business side, and this is going to lead to better health outcomes for the subjects, which leads to better health outcomes for all of us.
And that idea of sharing is part of data usage, but also data has to be interoperable and somehow compatible. And if it's coming in from multiple sources, multiple silos, and is not all in the same format, is there a layer somewhere in here that equalizes or normalizes all of that?
Absolutely, and that's where the governance really comes in. So that's the government, the ability to look at different types of data, to really apply, ratings and collaboration across that data, and put it in formats that business users understand and share appropriately, to your point. So that is that ease of use and time to value that Elation brings to the market.
And speaking of silos, does the Elation platform itself, is that a cloud application? That is to say, it's not any single server owner's application, which can get you into the same problem as the silos.
Correct. So we work with both an on-premise and cloud applications. In a lot of cases, it really depends on what our federal agencies and state and local agencies want to work with. So we provide that flexibility to them, and we typically look at it on a, as a customer partner basis, how they want to provide that capability to their customers internally.
And you mentioned a large health agency. We can probably guess who that is. Any other good examples from government where you're seeing this kind of process come together and they're getting value out of data and empowering their people with data?
Another example is across DoD, where it was around a financial system, if you will. And they were wasting about $150 million a year in time and materials and budget in terms of looking across siloed and duplicative systems. And we're able to essentially put one face across that data and bringing in an Elation governance capability to provide essentially one place to go for that data. Now, again, using the data that's coming in, not looking to rip and replace, but basically help them work more efficiently on how they're accessing data, even if it's generating financial reports, budgeting and consolidation. We're able to streamline that process by a factor of 10x and save millions of dollars for them.
Yeah, that leads to a detailed question I wanted to ask you also. We talked about databases and use of siloed databases. A lot of the planning and a lot of the budget execution work, especially DoD, and you see it across federal agencies is still in spreadsheets. And, for DoD and other agencies, there's often information that's in PDFs or in other sources like that are not structured databases. Can Elation help normalize that type of data also?
We can, and it's, we have different types of access engines, API capabilities that can get to that data, access it, and bring it into our capabilities in our governance architecture.
All right, so I'm a program manager or I'm an agency deputy assistant secretary, and I want to start getting this culture of data going. What are the first things I have to do?
So I think there's several ways to do it. So it's starting with a mission critical goal in mind. So again, I talked earlier to improper payments, healthcare, what have you. Let's work on a data strategy together. So you've got to start with that end goal in mind. And then it's assigning metrics for success and roadmaps with a company like ours, doing things like data strategy engagements, doing things like proofs of value along those metrics to really build upon that success. Sometimes you have to start small, sometimes not, but often we're seeing successes. We're starting with a certain program or certain set of data. And then I keep talking about, I know artificial intelligence and machine learning, but if we can build that process and it's iterative, we can take that and apply it to other parts of the program or other programs. And that's where we've seen a tremendous amount of success. So it's what's the end goal in mind? And then we start working iteratively towards that goal. It's a process, but once we get that process improvement going, we've seen dramatic success.
And finally, what else should people know about Elation before we sign off?
So we're in the middle of I would say, a data culture movement. So data is growing exponentially. I think it's 10x sometimes a year, depending on certain programs. And the time for command and control approaches is gone. Democratization of data is needed, and it's needed now. And whether we're looking at fraud and improper payments, healthcare, even basic financial management capabilities, the government has a very strategic asset in their hands right now. It's their own data. So the time now is to look at how we get to it, how we govern it. That's going to be the difference maker, and Elation can help.
All right. Scott Westman is the Vice President of Sales for Public Sector at Elation. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm Tom Temin. You're listening to Federal News Network. Let's go back to the studio now for more on the Data Industry Exchange.